I never meant to stop walking, but when your name slips through a cracked door, spoken by those who control your paycheck, your body betrays you. You freeze. Cut her salary by 40%. She's useless overhead. The words stung, sharp and cold, delivered in the clipped arrogance of Colin Warwick, the new CEO of Carrington Dynamics. My name is Lisa Grant, and for 12 years, I've been the quiet force behind strategic operations, mentoring junior teams, entangling crises, and keeping the company's chaos from unraveling in public. I don't chase glory or crave applause. But I never imagined they'd erase me entirely, reducing me to a line item to be slashed. That evening, I'd stayed late to finalize a quarterly report, my office a modest corner on the 14th floor, close enough to the conference room to catch their voices. The board was in session, uninvited to me. Someone, an intern, likely, rushing for coffee, had left the door ajar. I paused, adjusting my bag, when Colin's voice cut through. She's not a producer. She manages things, files, paperwork. Anyone can do that. We're overpaying her by a mile. A cold twist knifed beneath my ribs, not just pain but betrayal, raw and heavy. Another voice, an older executive with a gravelly chuckle, asked, "You think she'll walk?" Colin's reply was instant, smug. "Lisa? She's a lifer. Mortgage, no kids, nowhere else to go. She needs this job." Laughter erupted, a sound that didn't just wound, it shattered something. I'd stayed late for these people, defended their missteps, fixed their half-baked plans when they crumbled. I was never the star, but I was the foundation. Now, I was useless overhead. I didn't cry. I didn't storm in. I turned, heels silent on the carpet, and walked back to my office. My reflection flickered in the glass wall, no shock, just a stillness I barely recognized. "They think I'm stuck," I whispered. How quaint. The word lingered, a quiet spark in the dark. I sat at my desk, the report still open, its charts and figures mocking the chaos of the moment. I closed the laptop, the click loud in the empty room. My hands didn't shake, but my mind was already moving, recalibrating. They thought they'd cornered me, but they'd only lit the fuse. The next morning, a calendar invite pinged at 6:45 a.m., an all-hands meeting for the strategy division, 9:00 a.m. sharp, no agenda, no prep. Unusual. Colin only called these for celebrations or executions, and I knew this wasn't a party. I arrived 5 minutes early, an old habit from years of precision. The conference room buzzed with nervous chatter, new hires fidgeting at the back, laptops open, eyes darting like prey, veterans like me up front, though that day, the front felt like a firing line. I took my usual seat, third from the head, and smoothed my blazer. The room smelled of stale coffee and tension, the kind that clings to polished tables and tight smiles. Colin strode in at 9:01, sleeves rolled, tie absent, a calculated casualness he wore like armor when delivering cruelty dressed as leadership. His polished shoes clicked against the tile, a metronome of control. He didn't sit, didn't smile. "Let's get to it," he said, voice flat. "We're making structural changes. Too many overlapping roles. Too much legacy redundancy." That phrase, legacy redundancy, landed like a blade. My chest tightened, but my face stayed still, a mask honed over years of navigating corporate games. He continued, "We've assessed contributions versus compensation. There are inefficiencies, effective immediately. Lisa Grant's compensation has been adjusted to reflect a more balanced structure." The room froze. A chair creaked. Eyes flicked toward me, quick and guilty, then away. Jared, a young analyst with a mop of curls and a habit of overthinking, stared with naked pity, his face screaming, "Did he just do that here?" Colin's tone never wavered. "This isn't personal. It's economics. Long-term management costs, when misaligned with productivity metrics, become drag. Management that's been here too long loses its edge." The words were a performance, each syllable rehearsed to sting without liability. I didn't move. My hands rested lightly in my lap, no frown, no reaction, just silence. Inside, a fire surged up my spine, my pulse thumping in my ears, a drumbeat of rage and clarity. Jared blinked, urging me to speak, to fight. I didn't. Colin flipped to the next slide, droning about reallocating resources and younger, agile thinkers. The message was clear, the old guard was expendable, and I was the example. When the meeting ended, people scattered like startled birds, their footsteps quick and uneven. No one met my eyes. A few nodded awkwardly, their sympathy a fleeting gesture. Jared lingered, his laptop half closed, and whispered, "I'm sorry." His voice cracked, betraying his youth. I nodded, my expression calm. "Don't be. It's just business." But in my chest, something had shifted, not just anger, but strategy. They thought I was cornered, a pawn pinned to the board. They didn't know I'd just marked the first move in my own restructuring. By 8:50 a.m., a sealed envelope sat on my desk, my name printed in bold, no greeting, no sender's mark. Inside was the revised contract, a 40% salary cut, effective immediately. Same title, Senior Strategy Officer, same workload, same endless meetings and crisis calls, but less value, less respect. Colin wouldn't deliver it himself, that would have required looking me in the eye. I sat, opened the folder, and read every word slowly, though I'd anticipated its contents. The insult was official, sealed with a company-branded pen, its gold logo glinting like a taunt. I traced the edge of the paper, the weight of it grounding me. At 9:02, I signed it without hesitation, my signature steady, and slid it back into the envelope. I walked it to HR, my heels echoing in the quiet hallway. The woman behind the desk, Ellen, blinked, her glasses slipping down her nose. "Is there a mistake?" she asked, voice soft with unease. "No," I said, calm and even. "This is exactly what he wanted." I turned and left before she could respond, her confusion trailing behind me. The day passed in a hush, the office a theater of avoidance. Jared kept his head down, his usual chatter silenced. Colleagues were polite but cautious, their smiles tight, as if I were radioactive. By evening, as sunlight faded through my office blinds, casting long shadows across the beige carpet, the building felt colder, emptier. At 7:28 p.m., alone with my laptop, I stared at a blank email, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. I didn't write. Instead, I pulled out my phone. 5 names, 5 numbers, clients who trusted me, not Carrington's logo, who'd seen me deliver results when Colin's vision was just whiteboard scribbles. Danielle Marks, who'd built a retail empire with my expansion plans. Marcus Tran, whose logistics firm I'd saved from collapse. Lillian and Roger, green tech innovators who valued my candor. And 2 others, each a pillar of my network, forged over years of late-night calls and quiet fixes. I didn't send a group text. Each message was personal, need to talk privately. Just us. No pitch, no desperation, just trust. By 7:43, all 5 replied, when and where. I stared at those messages, fingers hovering over the screen. Colin thought I was out of moves, that I'd shrink under his shadow and accept my demotion like a loyal soldier. He misread silence for surrender. It wasn't. Silence was strategy, the first line of a plan he'd never see coming. I leaned back, the office chair creaking softly, and let the moment settle. The city skyline glowed beyond the window, a constellation of ambition and indifference. I wasn't stuck. I was starting. I waited a full day before following up, not from doubt, but from patience. Trust was my currency, and haste would cheapen it. At 10:15 a.m. the next day, I met Danielle Marks at the corner cafe on Ashford, where we'd once brainstormed over croissants before product launches. The cafe smelled of espresso and warm bread, a faint comfort against the weight of the moment. She was already there, her phone face down, her untouched espresso cooling in its cup. "Lisa," she said, concern heavy in her voice, "what's going on?" I sat, folding my hands on the table, and told her the truth, no embellishment. They cut my salary by half. Called me dead weight. I'm still doing the same work, just discounted. Her jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing. "After all you've done? You built our expansion strategy from nothing. Every store we opened in the Midwest was because of you." I met her gaze, steady. "I'm not asking for anything. Just letting you know I may not be with Carrington much longer." She leaned forward, her voice low but firm. "Tell me when you walk. I'll walk too." Her words weren't just loyalty, they were a promise, forged in years of shared victories. At 2:06 p.m., I sat in a golf cart beside Marcus Tran, CFO of a logistics firm I'd worked with for 8 years. The air smelled of cut grass and diesel as we rolled across his company's sprawling campus. I barely started explaining before he cut me off. "You saved our systems from collapsing last fall, Lisa. We'd have lost millions without you. If you go, I go." His tone was matter-of-fact, unshakable. At 5:40 p.m., I met Lillian and Roger, co-founders of a green tech startup, on their rooftop workspace downtown. The city sprawled below, its lights flickering like a living map. They didn't blink when I told them. "We were never loyal to Carrington," Roger said, leaning back in his chair. "We were loyal to you. You didn't just manage our account, you shaped our vision." Lillian nodded, her eyes fierce. "Name the time, and we're with you." Each conversation varied, some with small talk, others with silence, but ended the same: they'd worked with me, not the company. By nightfall, I sat in my car, city lights blurring through the windshield. The humiliation from Colin's meeting didn't weigh as heavily. It wasn't just that they understood, they never saw me as Colin did: disposable, replaceable, overhead. I was the reason they stayed, the thread that held their trust. And now, I was the reason they'd leave. I drove home slowly, the radio off, letting the hum of the city fill the silence. My apartment was dark when I arrived, the kind of quiet that amplifies thought. I poured a glass of water, not wine. Clarity was my ally tonight. Colin's insults faded, replaced by a deeper memory, one buried in the foundation of Carrington dynamics. 5 years ago, the company was bleeding. Burn rates outpacing forecasts. A major investor bailing after a PR scandal involving a failed product launch, payroll barely clearing the final quarter. The boardroom was a pressure cooker, executives snapping at each other, their confidence crumbling under the weight of looming insolvency. I wasn't just a strategy officer then, I was a fixer, the one who stayed calm when others panicked. I had one connection they didn't: my godfather, Raymond Ellis. Not a venture capitalist, not a showman. He didn't need the spotlight or the ego of high-stakes deals. He was a quiet investor, a man who valued stability over flash. He offered Carrington $4 million in bridge capital, paid in 2 installments, to cover operating expenses and keep the lights on. His condition was ironclad: future credit facilities, funding lines, or restructuring loans required signature authorization from his appointee, me, Lisa Grant. They agreed, too frantic to negotiate. I still remember the CFO, Harold Vance, signing the final page, his hand trembling from exhaustion and relief. He didn't read the fine print, none of them did. They thought the clause was symbolic, a nod to a benevolent backer. They never imagined I'd use it. But I kept the original contract, not a scanned copy but the ink signed. Notarized version, sealed in a fireproof box in my home office. It was in the bottom drawer, behind retirement folders, beneath a blank leather-bound notebook no one had ever opened. At 8:02 p.m., I unlocked the box and pulled it out. The paper was heavy, its edges crisp despite the years. My name stood clear in Section 4.2, Appointee Authority, Lisa Grant. My initials marked every page, a quiet vow. I ran my thumb over the embossed notary stamp, its texture grounding me. I slid it into a black folder with a magnetic clasp. The sound of it closing like a door locking. I didn't need to act yet. Timing was everything. Colin thought I was trapped, that my only weapons were whispers and client loyalty. He didn't see the key I'd held for years, the one that could lock him out of every financial move he planned. The irony was almost poetic: the contract that saved his job 5 years ago would be the one to end it. The next morning, a calendar update pinged at 9:20 a.m., executive champagne briefing, 10:05 a.m. Conference room alpha, mandatory. Subject, expansion approved. Colin was celebrating a $4 million credit line he'd rushed through with Hanover Trust Bank, assuming the old deal was buried under 5 years of success. At 10:03, I walked into a room dressed for excess: gold-rimmed flutes, pastries with edible logos, a catered spread that screamed overconfidence. Interns hovered against the wall, unsure if they were meant to celebrate or serve, their name badges glinting under the fluorescent lights. Colin stood center stage, sleeves rolled, hair styled to perfection, a poster boy for corporate ambition. Good morning, he beamed, his voice carrying the rehearsed warmth of a keynote speaker. Today marks a turning point. We've secured $4 million to scale faster, build smarter, and hire new energy into leadership. His eyes flicked to the older section of the room, where I sat among the veterans. We can't rely on legacy thinking. We must let go of overhead that stopped moving the needle. The jab wasn't subtle, but subtlety was never his strength. I didn't flinch, just raised my glass with the others, the champagne cold and dry, too celebratory for a victory not yet secured. At 10:21, my phone buzzed under the table. An email from Hanover Trust, funding hold notification. Your recent credit line request is pending signature from L. Grant. I locked the screen, my face a blank mask. Let them toast. Let the illusion linger. The next 20 minutes dragged, a parade of plastic smiles and forced laughter. The head of marketing, a woman named Claire who thrived on theatrics, teared up, praising Colin's bold moves as if he'd invented ambition. But unease rippled beneath the noise. The IT manager, Raj, checked his watch twice, his brow furrowed. The HR director, Ellen, scrolled her phone, her lips pursed. An intern, barely 20, stood rigid, sensing the room's undercurrent. Colin's smile faltered when Javier, the CFO, leaned in and asked, "We're fully cleared, right?" Colin waved it off, his confidence a touch too quick. Just paperwork formalities. But paperwork has teeth, and I held the bite. At 10:49, I stood, adjusted my blazer, and slipped out. No one noticed, or if they did, they pretended not to. The hallway felt cooler, lighter, the echo of my heels a steady rhythm against the polished tile. My reflection in the glass walls didn't look victorious, but it didn't look defeated either. I stopped at the 10th floor kitchen, where someone had brewed a fresh pot of coffee. Its bitter aroma grounding me. I poured half a cup, just enough to warm my hands, and stood by the window, the city sprawling below like a map of possibilities. My reflection stared back, steady, unyielding. Mira, the new accounts assistant, appeared behind me, hovering by the fridge. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft, cautious. I smiled, the motion small but genuine. "I'm good." She studied me for a moment, unsure, then nodded and left. I appreciated her kindness, but I didn't need concern. I needed space to execute. At 11:02, I closed my office door. The smile fell. The air shifted, sharp with purpose. My laptop opened, and the Hanover Trust email waited, patient and emotionless, pending signature from L. Grant. I hit reply, typed declined. Do not attempt renewal without full authorization, and pressed send. No greeting, no closing, just the cold edge they'd ignored for too long. At 11:10, Carrington's lifeline stalled, a silent embolism no one felt yet. The company's pulse depended on my signature. And I'd just flatlined it. Next came the second move. From the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, I retrieved a matte black USB drive, labeled, offline, secure. Over the next 30 minutes, I copied tier client documentation, project timelines, relationship notes, issue logs, personalized rollout maps. These weren't company secrets, they were mine, built through midnight calls, through trust earned over years of delivering when others faltered. By 11:46, I transferred the final folder. Client transition contingency. My private assessments, notes I'd never shared and never would. I slipped the USB into its case and secured it in the side pocket of my leather bag, a small detail, a quiet conclusion. I leaned back, my chair creaking as it touched the wall. No part of me shook. This wasn't revenge or an emotional outburst. It was clarity, a plan unfolding with the precision of a chess master's endgame. Outside my door, Colin's voice echoed faintly through the glass, spouting jargon about productivity metrics and scalable assets. Performance theater, all of it. He had no idea the money hadn't cleared. I imagined him pacing in front of his screen, wondering why no confirmation had arrived, probably blaming an analyst, raising his voice just enough to make someone nervous. But not me. He wouldn't suspect me, because in his mind, I was processed. My story ended with a demotion and a polite nod. That was the beauty of invisibility. It blinds them to the one who signs quietly, the one who can shut it all down just as quietly. A late-night invite arrived at 10:15 p.m., Executive Finance Review, 10:30 a.m., Boardroom B, mandatory. Colin had finally noticed the numbers weren't moving. The funding hadn't landed. The system wasn't stalled, it was blocked, and he was ready to confront a problem he couldn't see coming. I arrived at 10:25, 5 minutes early, as always. The boardroom was a study in tension, the air thick with unspoken questions. Colin stood near the touchscreen monitor, mid-conversation with Javier. The CFO, his gestures sharp, his voice low but strained. Department heads, marketing, product, legal, sat along the far wall, their faces tight, controlled, curious. I slid into my usual seat at the end of the table, black leather folder resting calmly in my lap. Colin didn't acknowledge me at first, clicking through slides of charts, forecasts, and stale positivity. Then, without warning, his tone shifted. "We've hit a small administrative snag with the credit disbursement," he said. His eyes finally landing on me. "Lisa, I believe there's a signature missing on the funding agreement. We need you to sign off so we can proceed." I looked at him, straight and silent, letting the pause hang heavy, unnatural. The room held its breath. Then I placed the black folder on the table and opened it slowly, revealing the original contract, 5 years old, embossed, ink-signed, notarized. I slid it forward, section 4.2 highlighted in sharp yellow, all future credit facility approvals require written signature authorization from the appointee of the originating capital provider. Lisa Grant. Gasps weren't audible, but the stillness was louder than any outburst. Colin stared at the page, blinking as if the words were in a foreign language. He tried to laugh, a brittle sound. "That was years ago. Surely that clause has expired." Javier leaned forward, his glasses catching the light as he studied the document. After 10 seconds, he spoke, his voice low. "She's right. This clause is still active. It was never nullified or renegotiated." Colin's jaw clenched, a muscle twitching. "No one informed me of this." Javier's glance was sharp, almost accusing. "It was your job to read the agreement." The silence that followed was suffocating, a vacuum where power shifted. The legal director, a woman named Patricia, darted her eyes between me and Colin. Her pen frozen midair. The product lead, a nervous man named Greg, fidgeted with his pen, clicking it twice before stopping. I exhaled, slow and full, realizing I'd been holding my breath since Colin's tenure began. "I'm not here to negotiate," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the tension. "I've already declined. The funds won't move forward, and no one in this room can override that." Colin tried to recover, straightening his back, his voice tight. "That would be considered sabotage." "Lisa." I tilted my head slightly, my gaze unwavering. "Only if you misunderstood who had control." He didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I gathered my folder, stood slowly, and turned toward the door. No one moved. No one stopped me. At 10:47, as I stepped out of the boardroom, my heels echoed on the polished tile, a rhythmic shedding of years spent being looked through. This wasn't just confrontation, it was release. I didn't rush back to my office. I walked slowly, letting the hallway's cool air settle around me. The glass walls reflected a woman I hadn't seen in years, not defeated, not victorious, but resolute. I stopped at the 10th floor kitchen again, the coffee pot now cold. I poured another half cup anyway, the routine grounding me. Outside, the city pulsed, indifferent to the drama unfolding within these walls. I thought of the years I'd spent here, 12 years of late nights, of mentoring analysts like Jared, of saving deals that others took credit for. I thought of the younger Lisa. The one who joined Carrington fresh from grad school, eager to prove herself, unaware of how the corporate machine chews up loyalty and spits out numbers. That Lisa would have been crushed by Colin's words. This Lisa was forging a new path. At 1:15 p.m., I entered my office for the last time. The space was unchanged, beige walls, a humming printer, a faded photo of the strategy team from 5 years ago, half of whom had been quietly pushed out. I stood by the window, watching clouds drift in slow motion above the skyline. The board meeting was over. Colin hadn't followed. No one had. The game was done, and the control had never been his. It had only taken this long for them to see it. I sat at my desk, the chair creaking under my weight, and opened my laptop. At 2:08, I composed my resignation letter, 3 sentences, no more, effective immediately. I resign from my role at Carrington Dynamics. My responsibilities are complete. The rest is yours to figure out. No gratitude, no pleasantries. I didn't owe them any. I spent the next hour tying up loose ends, clearing bookmarks, exporting personal templates I'd crafted on my own time, wiping cached logins from the company system. Every click was deliberate, a severance of ties. A soft knock came at the door. Mira peeked in, her badge dangling loosely, her eyes wide with caution. "I heard," she said. "Is it true?" I nodded, my expression soft but firm. "It's over." She stepped inside, lowering her voice. "I'm new, but watching you handle this, I've never seen anything like it. They didn't even realize you were the one holding the thread." I smiled faintly, the first real warmth I'd felt all day. Sometimes the thread doesn't need to be loud. It just holds everything together until it's time to let go. She nodded, a spark of admiration in her eyes, and slipped out. At 3:01 p.m., I hit send on the resignation email. No reply came, not immediately. I didn't need one. I gathered my bag, the USB drive secure in its pocket, and walked to the elevator. The doors closed with a soft ding. And I didn't look back. The lobby was quiet, the receptionist glancing up briefly before returning to her screen. Outside, the air was crisp, the city alive with the hum of traffic and ambition. I stood for a moment, letting it sink in. 12 years, countless hours, and it ended with a single email. But it wasn't an ending, it was a pivot. The next morning, at 8:05, I brewed coffee at home, the ritual unfamiliar after years of office sludge. Sunlight spilled through my kitchen windows, catching dust motes in the air, a beauty I hadn't noticed in months. No rush, no inbox, no forced small talk over lukewarm muffins. My phone buzzed, a cascade of notifications. "Danielle Marks, as of this morning, we've terminated our engagement with Carrington Dynamics. We're moving our contract." Then Marcus Tran just submitted our formal notice. "Expect our team to follow you." By 8:50, 5 separate emails from 5 clients, each confirming they'd ended their agreements with Carrington. The messages weren't vengeful or dramatic, just clear, resolute. Rogers was the last, and it cut deepest. Lisa was the brand, not your company. 6 words that made every humiliation, every overlooked meeting, every silent battle worth it. I wasn't a cog in their machine, I was the engine they never bothered to acknowledge, and now I was driving in a direction they couldn't follow. Rain fell as I stepped outside Carrington Dynamics for the last time, a soft drizzle that blurred the edges of the streetlights and softened the glass towers above. I didn't run for cover. I let it fall, cold and clean, washing away the weight of years spent unseen. The building stood silent behind me, a monument to my erasure. But I was the one walking away. At 4:02 p.m., standing on the curb with my umbrella folded at my side, my phone pinged with a final notification, funding approved. Welcome to Grant. 20 minutes later, I walked into a different kind of office. No marble floors, no polished slogans, just warm wood panels and soft amber lighting. My name, Grant. I sat at my new desk, the wood smooth under my fingers, and opened my laptop. The Zoom waiting room chimed, 5 names blinking: Danielle, Marcus, Lillian, Roger, and a 5th client, a quiet manufacturing firm I'd guided through a merger. I clicked admit all, and their faces filled the screen, smiling, unshaken, present. "We're ready when you are, Lisa," Danielle said, her voice steady with trust. I nodded, the weight of their faith grounding me. "Let's get started." As I began the call, outlining the next steps for our partnership, the office door opened behind me. I turned, expecting the courier with branding samples, but it was Mira. She looked different without her Carrington badge, more grounded, less cautious, a lightness in her posture. She hesitated by the door, clutching a folder. "I saw the company update," she said, her voice soft but resolute. "I figured I'd check if maybe you're hiring?" My chest tightened, not from surprise but from something gentler. A full circle moment I hadn't anticipated. I stood, nodding toward the extra desk by the window, its surface catching the late afternoon light. "Let's talk after the call," I said. She smiled, a small but genuine curve of her lips, and for the first time that day, I did too. They thought I was a forgotten wire, a loose thread in their machine. They were wrong. I was the main circuit, the pulse that kept it running. And I'd just flipped the switch, not to destroy, but to build something new, something that was mine.